Stop scrolling for just a second, because I want you to watch a stick figure named Sketch have the worst evening of his week. He is standing in the middle of a grocery store at 11 at night, one hand gripping a shopping cart, the other hovering over a box of cereal with a cartoon tiger on it. His little stick eyes are wide. His stick mouth is a flat, nervous line. He has already put 6 things in the cart that he did not come here for, and he cannot understand why he cannot stop. He looks down at his own thin arms and thinks the thought that almost everyone has thought in that aisle at that hour. What is wrong with me? Why am I so weak? That is where our story begins. Not with a fact, with a feeling. Because Sketch is convinced, deep down, that he is broken. That somewhere out there are stronger people with better willpower. And that ancient humans, those lean, tough survival machines we always see in documentaries, would look at him with disgust. So Sketch does something no one in that cereal aisle usually does. He decides to actually find out if that is true. He grips the cart, closes his eyes, and imagines the toughest, leanest, most disciplined human he can think of. And when he opens his eyes, someone is standing right next to him in the aisle. It is another stick figure. Same thin arms, same round head, same flat little mouth. But this one is wrapped in an animal skin, holding a spear, and looking at 47 kinds of cereal like they are a religious vision. Sketch has summoned a Homo sapiens from 50,000 years ago, not a grunting, hunched cartoon caveman, a real one. Same brain as Sketch, same lungs, same hunger, same capacity for frustration and joy and truly terrible decisions. The exact same biological hardware, just running under an animal skin instead of a hoodie. Sketch decides to call him Ash, and Sketch thinks, perfect. Now I will watch a real ancient human resist all this junk, and I will finally understand what discipline is supposed to look like. So, he watches. Ash wanders. Ash passes the snack aisle. Ash passes the frozen food. Ash passes the bakery, where something incredible is happening with bread and butter and sugar, and his stick eyes go absolutely enormous. He has never in his life stood inside this much available food at once. His brain is going haywire. And here is the thing Sketch notices, the thing that makes his stomach drop. Ash is not resisting anything. Ash is reaching for everything. His arms are filling the cart faster than Sketch ever could. He is not disgusted. He is delighted. And that is when Sketch asks the real question. Not how does this ancient human feel about self-checkout? Though, honestly, that would be a great video. The real question is this. Could Ash, this elite survival machine, optimized by millions of years of evolution, actually become obese? Could he? Because we have all been told the same story our whole lives. Ancient humans were lean because they ran everywhere. They hunted. They walked for miles. They were basically prehistoric athletes with stone tools, and we are their disappointing descendants, sitting on couches eating cereal straight out of the box at 11 at night. But watching Ash empty the bakery shelf into a cart, Sketch is starting to wonder if that story is missing something enormous. So Sketch takes Ash by the arm and says, "Come on. If I am going to understand you, I have to see where you actually come from." And the grocery store dissolves around them. Now they are standing in a wide-open landscape, somewhere between 300,000 and 10,000 years ago, long before farming, long before cities. This is Ash's real world. And Sketch immediately notices there is no menu here. There is no schedule. There is no such thing as Tuesday being pasta night. There is only one brutal question, repeated every single day of Ash's life. What can I find today? And is it worth the energy it costs me to go get it? Ash lives on whatever the world hands him. Big game one week, roots and tubers the next. Fruit when it happens to be in season. Fish, eggs, insects, which by the way are packed with protein and far less dramatic than people make them. His diet is wildly, chaotically varied, and it changes with the seasons and the land. But the part that stops Sketch cold is the timing. Ash does not eat 3 meals a day. He does not have a lunch break. He does not snack. He eats when food exists, and he does not eat when food does not exist. And sometimes food does not exist for days. Sometimes in a hard winter or a long drought, it does not exist for weeks. There is no backup pantry. There is no second option. There is no delivery app with a 30-minute guarantee. Sketch watches Ash sit by a cold fire with an empty stomach, waiting, and Sketch thinks, well, there it is. Of course he is lean. He is starving half the time and running the other half. That is the whole answer. And Ash, this ancient stick figure, just looks at Sketch. And Sketch has the uncomfortable feeling that he has gotten something very, very wrong. Because here is where everything Sketch thought he knew starts to quietly fall apart. Scientists have actually studied the closest living version of Ash we still have. There are people alive right now who still live by the old methods, still hunt with handmade bows, still forage across the land the way our ancestors did. The most studied of them are the Hadza people of northern Tanzania, and they are extraordinary. Hadza women dig tubers out of hard, sun-baked soil and carry heavy loads across long distances. Hadza men track game across the open savanna for hours in the heat. They do not drive, they do not sit in chairs for 8 hours. Their level of daily movement would flatten the average modern person in about 4 business days. Sketch pictures it and thinks, right, so these people must burn a mountain of calories compared to some office worker. That is obvious, and that is exactly what every researcher expected too. So they strapped real activity monitors onto Hadza adults and measured their daily energy burn with precise equipment, not guesses, not self-reporting, real measurement. And the result, published in a study in the journal PLOS One, broke everyone's brain. The total daily energy the Hadza burned was statistically the same as adults in the United States, the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, and Japan. Sketch stops walking. He makes Ash repeat it back to him because it cannot be right. A Hadza woman who walks for miles, digs in the earth, hauls water, and manages her children in the African heat burns roughly the same number of calories in a day as an American woman who drives to an office and sits at a computer for 8 hours. The same total. Sketch throws his little stick arms in the air. How is that even possible? And this is the first big lesson of the whole journey, the one that starts to change everything for Sketch. The human body is not a simple machine that just burns more the harder you push it. The body is more like an extremely cautious accountant. When you start spending more on one line of the budget, movement, that accountant quietly goes and finds cuts somewhere else, so the total spending stays about the same. The Hadza burn less energy at rest. The basic background rate that keeps the heart beating and the cells running is lower in their bodies once you account for size. The immune system runs a little leaner. Certain repair and maintenance jobs get dialed down. Hormones shift. And when you add it all up, the grand total lands almost exactly where the office worker in Chicago lands. Sketch sits down on a rock next to Ash, stunned, because this means something huge. If the most active people alive today burn the same calories as the most sedentary people alive today, then movement, all that running and walking and hunting, was never the real reason Ash stayed lean. There has to be another reason. And Ash points at his own empty stomach and points at the cold sky, and Sketch finally gets it. The reason was scarcity. Ash was not lean because he moved so much. Ash was lean because the world simply would not hand him enough food, consistently enough, for long enough, to ever build up a real surplus. And without a long surplus, a body physically cannot store enough fat to become obese. The empty stretches were doing all the work, not the running. But Sketch is not done being unsettled, because Ash shows him the next piece. And this is the piece that changes how Sketch sees his own body forever. Ash's ancient body was not neutral about fat. It was not indifferent. It was aggressively, enthusiastically, desperately pro-fat. Every time food appeared, Ash's whole system had one screaming priority. Store as much of this as possible, right now, because the body knew, from deep memory, that the food would stop. It always stopped. Sketch learns this has a name. It comes from an idea called the Thrifty gene hypothesis, first proposed by a geneticist named James Neal back in 1962. The idea is simple and a little haunting. Nature specifically favored the humans who were best at storing energy as fat during the good times, because those were the humans who survived the famines that always followed. The genes that make fat storage efficient were not accidents. They were winning tickets. The ancient human who could gorge on berries and game in a good season and pack it all onto his body as fat was the one who walked out of winter alive. Everyone worse at it starved. So those efficient fat-storing genes spread. They became normal. They became us. And Sketch looks down at himself, then over at Ash, and understands something that makes his little chest tighten. You carry those genes. Ash carries those genes. They are the same genes. Ash was not lean because his body did not want fat. His body wanted fat more than almost anything. His body was trying every single day to get fat. Ash was lean only because his world physically refused to let his body succeed. Which means Sketch is now standing on the edge of a very uncomfortable question. Take that same body, that same fat-hoarding, calorie-obsessed, thrifty ancient biology. Take those exact same genes and drop them into a world where calories are cheap, food is everywhere 24 hours a day, and the only thing standing between you and 3,000 calories is 5 minutes and a phone. What happens then? Sketch already knows the answer because he is living inside it. But Ash needs proof, so Sketch takes him to see it happen in real history. They travel to the Sonoran Desert of Arizona, to the land of the Pima people, and Sketch explains what he learned. For thousands of years, the Pima lived as farmers and foragers in that hard, dry desert. They were lean, they were active. There was no obesity crisis among them, and no reason there ever would be, because their bodies were tuned to a place where every calorie had to be earned. Then, in the late 1800s, settlers upstream diverted the rivers the Pima depended on for their crops. Their farming collapsed. And the government stepped in with food assistance, and the food that arrived was refined flour, lard, canned goods, and sugar. Sketch watches the timeline unfold, and it is fast, horribly fast. Within 1 or 2 generations, a blink in the story of a people, the Pima developed some of the highest rates of obesity and type 2 diabetes ever recorded anywhere in the human race. Rates that stunned the researchers who found them. Rates with no precedent in the entire history of these people. And here is the part Sketch makes Ash pay very close attention to. Their genes had not changed at all, not one bit. Only their food had changed. And the proof of that is sitting right across the border. Some of the same Pima lineage lived in the Sierra Madre Mountains of Mexico. Same ethnic group, same ancient bloodline, same ancestral DNA. And those relatives had kept eating a traditional diet, and they stayed dramatically leaner and healthier than their cousins in Arizona. Same exact software, different inputs, completely different result. Sketch turns to Ash and says the sentence that reframes the whole story. The thrifty gene was never a flaw. It was a feature that only became a bug the moment the world it was built for disappeared. Now, Ash gets stubborn. He crosses his stick arms and basically says, "Fine, but in my world could I ever have gotten fat?" And Sketch, being fair, actually thinks about it. And he admits, under very specific conditions, maybe a little, not every ancient world was equally starved. Some places had rare bursts of concentrated food. Sketch shows Ash a river in the Pacific Northwest during a salmon run, where for a few weeks the water fills with fish so thick you could almost reach in and grab them by the armful. Salmon is rich, fatty, calorie-dense food. A group that camped by that river and ate hard for those weeks could pile on a real surplus. And if that happened to line up with a mild winter, where the stored fat was not burned off as fast as usual, then yes, some of those people might have carried more fat than they strictly needed. But, Sketch says, and this is the crucial but, even then, Ash almost certainly could not have reached obesity the way we define it today. And the reason is beautiful and simple. Natural food, even rich natural food, knows how to make you stop. Sketch explains it while Ash eats a whole grilled salmon and slows down halfway through, full. The fat in wild salmon triggers signals that tell the brain, enough. The protein in game meat fills you up. The fiber in tubers slows everything down. And the sheer variety of a natural diet creates something researchers call sensory-specific satiety, the way you naturally stop wanting a food once you have had enough of it. A salmon fills you up. You can only eat so much salmon before your body throws up a white flag and says, "Done, thank you." Then Sketch pulls a bag of modern chips out of nowhere, hands it to Ash, and says, "Now try this." And Ash cannot stop. He eats the whole bag and looks around for another one, confused, still not full. Because the chip was engineered. Sketch explains that the exact ratio of salt, fat, and carbohydrate in ultra-processed food is calibrated, not by accident but on purpose, to hit what food scientists call the bliss point. It is the combination that gives you maximum pleasure while giving you the least possible feeling of fullness. It is designed so the next chip feels just as exciting as the first, because your brain's reward system never quite gets the satisfaction it keeps being promised. And Sketch says the line that lands hardest: nature never made a bliss point food. Nature had no reason to stop you from feeling full. Only an industry that profits from you eating more and more has a reason to build a food that defeats the feeling of enough. Ash stares at the empty chip bag in his stick hand, and for the first time on the whole journey, he looks unsettled instead of delighted. To make sure Ash believes all of this, Sketch takes him to see the bones, because the archaeological record backs up every word in ways that are almost uncomfortable to look at. When scientists examine skeletons from ancient hunter-gatherers from Ash's world, the picture that comes back is one of striking health. The bones are dense and strong. The joints show the wear of a lifetime of varied, natural movement, not the repetitive damage of one strained motion done over and over. The teeth are worn from coarse food, but have almost no cavities, because the refined sugars that feed cavity-causing bacteria simply were not part of the diet. There is no sign of the chronic metabolic disease we link with obesity. No sign of the bone stress from carrying huge excess weight. No sign of decades of buildup clogging the arteries. These were not sick people. Sketch says it plainly. Ash, your people were healthy. And then Sketch shows him what happened next, around 10,000 years ago, when farming began. Humans settled down. They grew crops. They stored grain. And the bones change almost immediately, in ways that should shock us more than they do. In some populations, average height drops by several inches within just a few generations after farming arrives. Bone density falls. Cavities suddenly appear everywhere. Signs of nutritional deficiency, especially iron deficiency anemia, start showing up in the bone tissue. And as people crowd together into settlements, signs of chronic illness and infectious disease climb. Sketch stands with Ash over these newer bones and explains the terrible irony. Farming gave humans surplus. It gave them the power to store food, to predict next year's harvest, to build villages and cities and eventually everything we call civilization. But the immediate physical price was real. A narrow diet built around one local grain meant less variety, weaker nutrition. And for the first time in the entire history of the species, humans could live in a lasting state of caloric surplus. For the first time, scarcity was no longer standing guard. Farming did not create mass obesity overnight because people still worked brutally hard in the fields. But it quietly pulled away the one barrier that had kept the thrifty gene in check for hundreds of thousands of years. Sketch looks Ash in the eye and says it. The grocery store was really invented the day the first grain storehouse was built. We just did not notice the consequences for another 10,000 years. Now Ash makes his last stand. He points at his own strong stick arms, at his lean frame, and basically argues, but surely all my movement protected me. Surely being this fit made getting fat impossible no matter what I ate. And Sketch, being honest, says part of that is true. Hunter-gatherers really do carry more muscle and less body fat than modern couch-bound people, even when the total calorie burn is the same. The Hadza are not just burning the same calories as Westerners. They are also leaner and more muscular across every age group. Older Hadza adults actually beat much younger Westerners on tests of heart and lung fitness. The conditioning that comes from a whole life of real, functional movement is genuine and it matters. But, Sketch says, and this is the last piece that finally clicks everything into place, that still does not change the core equation. The Hadza are not lean because they move more and therefore burn more. They are lean because they eat an unprocessed, varied, naturally filling diet with no bliss point foods, no engineered snacks, no artificial calorie density. And if you gave the Hadza a modern diet while they kept their entire traditional lifestyle, all the walking, all the foraging, all the hard physical work, the research strongly suggests they would still gain weight. Because the change would happen on the intake side of the equation, not the burn side. Movement helps. It genuinely, deeply helps, and not only for weight. The benefits for the heart, the hormones, the mind, are enormous and real. But movement alone, without touching what actually goes into the body, is not the magic override switch the wellness world has spent decades pretending it is. And now the whole journey has led Sketch to the one honest answer to the question he started with. Could Ash, an ancient human, become obese in his own world? Almost certainly not. But not because Ash had better biology than Sketch. Not because Ash had some ancient virtue or iron discipline that we have lost. Ash stayed lean only because his world physically refused to give him the long, steady surplus that obesity requires. Scarcity was the default, famine was the reset button. Natural, filling, unprocessed food was the only food that existed. Ash's body wanted, desperately, to store fat. The world just would not hand him enough raw material to do it. And then Sketch does the final experiment in his own head, and it is the one that breaks his heart open a little. He imagines taking Ash, exactly as he is, and dropping him permanently into the modern world, giving him ultra-processed foods engineered to defeat fullness, giving him a chair to sit in for 8 hours, giving him bright screens at night that scramble his sleep and his stress hormones, giving him constant low-grade worry that quietly cranks up his appetite, and giving him a phone that puts 10,000 calories within reach at any hour of any night. And Sketch realizes, with total certainty, that Ash would be just as vulnerable as any modern person, maybe more. Because Ash would have no cultural training and restraint, no lived experience of endless abundance, no concept of a serving size or why it might matter. His ancient brain, seeing a drive-through menu for the first time, would read it as the single greatest windfall of food in the history of his entire species. And every instinct in him would scream the same thing. Eat all of it. Eat it now. Store every calorie. Winter is always coming. And that, finally, is when Sketch stops seeing Ash as a stranger. Because he looks at Ash's thin, stick arms, his round head, his flat little mouth, and he realizes they are identical to his own. They always were. The animal skin was just a costume. Underneath, the same brain, the same metabolism, the same hormones, the same thrifty, fat-loving, scarcity-haunted body. The distance between Ash 50,000 years ago and Sketch standing in that cereal aisle is, in the story of evolution, essentially nothing. A few thousand generations, a blink. Sketch is not the disappointing descendant of the ancient human. Sketch is the ancient human. He always was. And the grocery store fades back in around him, 11 at night, one hand on the cart, the other hand still hovering over that box of cereal with the cartoon tiger on it. But something in Sketch's face has changed. The flat, nervous line of his mouth is softer now, because he finally understands what he is. He is a body built to survive scarcity, standing inside a world of engineered abundance, and struggling, not because it is broken, but because it is doing exactly what it was built to do in a place it was never built for. Every time he cannot stop after a few chips, that is not a character flaw. That is a nervous system tuned over 300,000 years to grab every calorie it can, running straight into a food designed on purpose to never let it feel satisfied. Every time something sweet leaves him wanting more instead of full, that is not weakness. That is his fullness. Signals failing to catch a food engineered to slip right past them. Every time he is completely full and the dessert still looks good, that is ancient reward. Wiring, lighting up at fat and sugar, the way it has lit up for 1,000 centuries, whispering that this moment of abundance is precious and must not be wasted. Sketch takes a slow breath. He looks at the cart. He looks at the tiger on the box. And for the first time in a long time, he does not hate himself. He understands himself. He gently puts 3 things back on the shelf, not out of shame, but out of something closer to kindness toward the ancient creature he is. Then he pushes the cart forward, a small stick figure in a huge, bright store, carrying inside him a body older than farming, older than cities, older than every story he was ever told about willpower. He did not become this way because the world would not let him. We gave him the world, and now, gently, one honest realization at a time, he is learning how to live inside it,